This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Klaas Ardinois on the show, and he helps people like me and you, CEOs, CTOs, that need some advisement when it comes to technology and leadership roles. Helps us when it comes to culture and things like that. So it's going to be a great conversation. Anyway, with all that being said, Klaas, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background, how you got to where you are today in your career, and what is it exactly that you do?
Sure. The public history of my career is, started with a software engineering degree whenever it was 25 years ago. Did some software engineering roles, rolled into project management and Scrum Mastery. This is like early days of Agile movement.
Yeah.
And then eventually for the last 10 years, been a CTO at pretty much anything from the early stages, 3 people in a garage style business, to being CTO at public companies, running 100 people, dealing with the ups and downs that come from that along the way, merging businesses, acquiring them. I think I've been lucky enough to have seen pretty much everything under the sun when it comes to running a technology organization in any size business. And so that led to me going, actually, that in itself is useful to share with other people. I'm becoming an advisor broadly to CEOs and CTOs to go, look, you may have an idea of where you want to go, but some outside perspective could help, whether that's a catalyst for change, whether that's a sounding board. Those are typically the kind of positions I find myself in these days.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's great that you've had such a variety of backgrounds through the tech space. I have as well, going from working with, nonprofits to education to, media, ISPs. And I think that helps you develop a well-rounded perspective and realizing that a lot of the tech services kind of are the same in multiple industries. They have their own, nuances that are different, but the core competency when it comes to leading a tech organization is roughly the same, in my opinion. What have you found?
Yeah, I always kind of break it down into 3 easy buckets, right? There is the bucket of keeping the lights on, which is inevitably a part of technology, whether that's in your kind of traditional IT of literally keeping the lights on and the Wi-Fi going, down to if you're more of a technical product business of keeping the product alive, ensuring uptime, ensuring your customers can use it. That's in sort of kind of a bucket of just basic BAU maintenance style work. And that's not to be underestimated. It's kind of BAU. Then there's a second part, which I think a lot of CTOs struggle with, which is how does technology actually drive that business forward? Like what is happening in technology that makes the business better? And then the last part, really, to me at least, is kind of looking at the broader technical ecosystem of what trends are happening that we should worry about as a technology team. These days everyone's on about AI, and we could probably spend hours chatting about that as well. But there's a sort of a dynamic of hey, the industry is moving one way, regardless of what my business is doing. Then there's kind of the flip side of that is, how does it apply to my business? What should I be doing? And then let's not forget that at the end of the day, we kind of do have to keep the lights on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I found that it all depends on the company's culture. Sometimes they think of IT as just the BAU work, just the, keeping the lights on. It's almost like it's a call center more than driving the business forward. And I've been in a company once where we took that shift where we were seen as a call center. We were just, PC refresh, internal software that we have to do to keep things going, versus switching gears and using tech to drive the business forward, optimize, productivity, work more in operations, and helping build products that then, more into a product management type, org. Do you see that digital transformation happen quite frequently in companies, or the other way around, or what do you usually see?
It's interesting because I I've been on both sides of that fence as an advisor of like advising people don't become a product company. Like, if I outsource your IT and treat it as a commodity component, you don't need it, and it's going to cost you too much time and money. And I think occasionally people have a habit of over obsessing about, my IT should drive whatever measure of productivity you've got in your organization, whether you're in a call center dealing with, the amount of notes people take, or whether you're in a more kind of heavy sales organization dealing with whatever underlying CRM. But there are parts of that business that are genuinely just don't bother. It's know your core. Go do your best at your core and outsource the rest. It's a headache less. Equally, I think where I find the more challenging transformation is when there's a fax machine in the house. Like I joke about it occasionally with my friends. Like my favorite business has a fax machine, because if you can run your operation on a fax machine, there's an endless amount of things that we could do that would make your business a lot better. And I don't necessarily mean better from a growth point of view, but less friction inside your operation. And that should kind of be the benefit you get. But I mean, luckily these days I don't come across many fax machines anymore. It's mainly not that low hanging fruit. But I think, to your point about mindset and culture, I think it really is it's a shift that has to come from the CEO down. Of like, hey, we want to transform and we want to become that kind of business that is driven by technology, that has input. It can't be a kind of an IT manager or a CTO in an island going, I'm going to optimize the technology part.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It comes from that, building that culture within that organization and having that teamwork among all C-levels and executives that kind of drive down to, the individual contributors. How do you develop that though, from a business perspective? Like, what do you advise CEOs, of how far to get involved and how far to not get involved?
So I think you have to take a step back almost and go, if you think about this, what's the role of a CEO in a business? Right, the role of a CEO in a business is to set direction, and then there's a bunch of lieutenants, your entire range of C team, to go and execute on that. And so technology shouldn't be any different. We just happen to be historically really bad at presenting measures that are meaningful. So half the work I do is come in and write technology strategy for people. So I spend a lot of time with CEOs going, what do you want to achieve? What do you want to achieve on your business? What does growth look like? How does that work? And then from there, go, okay, if that's what you want to do with the company, let's now go sit down with your CTO or whoever your tech leader is and go, hey, if that's what we're trying to achieve, where do you think the obvious gaps are? Where does the technology fall short? Where does it break? And how do we go fix that? But it has to be that direction. It has to be a push. It can't be just a kind of a technologist on their own going, I'm going to optimize the organization, because it'll never work unless the entire organization agrees on that kind of overarching framework of what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I've been in a company before where a VP in tech tried to push digital transformation from his level out, across other folks, and it was immediately like shot down by other executives and other VPs that just didn't want any part of it. And there was no direction from the top to have that. And, that person ended up leaving, and it seemed like an entire failed process at the point, because he never got buy-in from the CEO.
Exactly. And from that person's perspective, it was probably, the organization is so old school and they don't want to change it, don't know what they're doing. And it's like, no, it's just you came at it from the wrong angle. And to be fair, that's when I said earlier that occasionally I am an external catalyst. That's exactly that's often how it goes, where someone in technology would actually go, hey, we want to make this change, but it needs to come from an outside voice to be credible. And so I can kind of get looped in to push that change through and then disappear again.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And a lot of times you have to have that, it is that third party, that outside perspective that comes in and can offer, professional strategic advice from someone who's been there and seen it on other areas. And I guess that's where you come in. I want to ask you, because I thought it was very interesting how you shifted from, engineering to, project management, Scrum, and Agile. Do those Agile processes and frameworks help you today when it comes to advising CEOs and other folks in the company?
That is a really good question. 50-50, I think. yes, they're helpful in the sense that they provide a structure and a language that people understand, and kind of, I'd say by now, most people in technology, even CEOs who are in technology companies, even if they're not hardcore technologists themselves, people kind of understand the agile principles by now. And then people kind of have a sense of like, hey, yeah, there's this sort of cadence, feedback, iteration type thing. We've moved beyond the 9-month death march to release a product, for which I'm happy. So that's the helpful part. I think the part where it kind of hurts now is that the Accentures and the Boston Consultings and you name it of this world have institutionalized it so much that it's lost its value. Like I refuse to do agile implementation projects at this point. If someone goes, hey, we want to put in agile, I just go, great, not me. If I can help you change your culture, I can help you focus, I can help you kind of go through that strategic mindset shift. But if your goal is to be really good at agile, I can't help you. I mean, no one's going to buy your product, frankly, because you're really good at your daily stand-up, right? It doesn't translate that way. And so I think some of that customer-focused message has gotten lost as it became institutionalized.
Mm. Yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of that has gotten lost. And I go back to like just the simple, agile principle, people over process. And a lot of times when you go through a digital transformation where you're going from, a non-agile methodology, or maybe it's a different agile methodology and moving to Scrum or something like that, people get so caught up with being purist and going through the process and of having to, do these things in a certain way that they lose sight of the actual objective. And I found like OKRs and having more objective-based results is more important than, the actual process that you get there sometimes.
Exactly. And, it also depends on what stage of the business you're in, right? If you're a, Salesforce-style multi-billion-dollar company, your process is going to look very different than the 3 guys in the garage who are trying to raise Series A, right? Like, if anything, if they had the same process, it wouldn't work for either of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's that kind of contextual nature of, for where you're at, you should be doing certain things, but they are very different on that trajectory. To give you an idea, when I was running a 100-people company, or this 100-people engineering team, you're kind of looking at, from a CTO perspective, you're dealing with how does this group of people work together with that group of people? What are the communication lines? What's the kind of cadence? And the top level metrics you're considering is really stuff like, how much things did we release over the last month? What was our uptime at that level, right? If you're in a startup situation where you've got 3 engineers plugging away, you're probably still hands-on code reviewing. You don't need to have a measured dashboard somewhere that goes, how many releases did we do? Because you probably pushed half of them. So I think it's understanding that context that really adds value to your process. And then the question becomes, is your process good enough to bubble up the right information at the right time?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about culture, because that's one of the reasons why I even started this podcast back in 2016 was, the people management side, building a good culture and a strong team. What advice do you have to someone that's, maybe just starting out as a CTO or head of technology, and they want to build that culture? What are some of the key components that are necessary?
I think, to me, the first one, and this is one that anyone who's worked with me has heard me say this far too many times, but fundamentally, I believe that people come in to do a good job. That is my heartfelt, fundamental ground belief. People come in to do a good job. And I've got, over those 25 years, 2 people I can think of who didn't do that. But bar those, the hundreds, probably about 1,000 by now that I've worked with, all came in to fundamentally do a good job. And so I think you have to have that faith in people, that trust, and then ask yourself the question, how do I make their life better? Right? I want them to be the best possible version of themselves. How can I do that as a leader? What do I need to do? And then then it falls down into buckets, right? There's a bucket of development. How do I coach people? How do I develop? How do I create, either directly through mentorships or one-on-ones, or indirectly through, just from a budget point of view, make sure there's processing and training budgets available. But how do I help people grow? There's a part around productivity, and I'm not talking about like lines of code typed or anything along that, but just genuine, right? How do I make sure that the output they produce is of value and they do it in a reasonable amount of time? which is more looking at your typical, that's where the agile processes kind of do come in and add value. And then the last one is more, I tend to take a career perspective on that culture of, I know engineers stick around, I don't know, 2 years these days in a job, but maybe a bit longer now since COVID. But before, it was definitely here in the UK, it was about 2 years, was about the average lifespan of an engineer in a company. So I know in your lengthy 30, 40-year career, you're probably going to spend about 2 years working for me. How can I leave you in a much better place than when you joined me? Sort of that, to me, is the basis for culture. And then in each of those buckets, you can kind of start working on programs or strategies or activities that help with those.
Yeah, I love that. And going back to the first one, that people come in to do a good job and happen to have faith and trust in those people. When you break that down even further, I think part of that is, to have trust in someone, you have to share with them. You have to have transparency. You have to have openness and communication. And there's lots of ways to break those kind of things down. And I love the fact that you have in there, how do you make their life better? And that's one of the things that I want to see is what can you do as a leader to give someone that extra, 1 or 2%, instead of meeting in the middle, 50%. Let's meet a little bit further on their side and help them along the way. And all that kind of builds up to what you're saying is having that career perspective and realizing that, at the end of the day, when they leave your company, assuming that the engineers, will at some point, you want them to leave thinking that was one of the best bosses I've ever worked for. And that's one of the best companies I've ever worked for. And that helps you grow that company in the future. At least that's been my perspective.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the key measures that I would typically look for when I advise CEOs or leadership teams when they bring in a new CTO is what does that CTO bring? Like, does he have a black book of engineers that they can call on and bring along? Like that to me is usually a sign of, okay, fine. This person has been somewhere and clearly has built a culture with people who are willing to follow. Not because they need mindless followers, but more because there's that relationship, there's that trust that can be built in this person to go, if you go somewhere, you're a phone call away. Like I know in my network, I've got probably 10 people I can call and chances are they'll join me wherever I go next.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. And, having that list of people that you've built up over time that will follow you basically is a very good mark of leaders. So how do we go about doing that? We have this culture, we define it out, but what are some of the practical things that someone could start today? Let's say they just got promoted to a CTO or just started a new role at a new company and they want to build that trust. They want to build that culture. How do they flesh these things out in order to take those first steps?
Sure. I think the first thing to realize is that your job as CTO, I'm going to assume that we're outside of the startup early days. Right? I'm going to assume there's a sort of at least a 30-ish, 40 people team, if not more. Right? Your job as CTO is no longer to worry too much about the details of the code, right? Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to get out of that whole, I'm the lead engineer. Like the first team you're in is working for that company, and therefore you need to run that technology organization and can look at it as a system. Now, the good news is most techies are good at systems thinking. And so that's part of it. Then how you build culture. I tend to put it in a framework of culture is ultimately, I think, I forgot who said it, but culture is what you do. It's not what you write on a piece of paper, right? Mm-hmm. And engineers by training are incredibly good at picking up inconsistencies. Right? Like 90% of engineering is finding the inconsistency in the logic. So I would argue, make it a point of your decisions, not only to say or communicate what you've decided, but also the underlying rationale. Explain to people how you came to a decision, explain why. I mean, clearly you can't do that every time because of sensitive information, but in general, have a very open, transparent process and explain why. So for me, I have a cadence with teams that I kind of go through from a quarterly kind of all staff one day where there's part update on strategy of, hey, the company wants to go there. That means this for us as an engineer. That's our focus for the quarter. And then the flip side is get people to talk, right? So teams come on there, they talk about what they've done, what they've enjoyed, struggles, wins, highlights, and you kind of celebrate the past quarter. Because ultimately, it's not a solo sport, it is a team sport, and so you want to get them engaged. Beyond that kind of quarterly sort of point in time, I have an ongoing dialogue with the entire organization, whether that's on a sort of a weekly all hands call where you're just kind of going through what's going on, whether that's an open door. I mean, these days people don't sit in offices anymore, at least not in a physical kind of shared space. But I genuinely try to be incredibly available for my team, and I kind of make that clear, not just as a sort of theoretical, you can hit me anytime and come and chat to me, but as a genuine, when I'm in the office and people are in, I'll go and chat and sit next to anyone and just go, hey, what's going on? And kind of how do we build that culture and that openness and encourage people to share. But I think going back to how do you build that culture, I think the real key is to have a very consistent line of communication to go like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is why, and we're moving along that direction. And if that direction changes, here's why it's changed. And now we're consistently going in the new direction. Because otherwise, I think you'll lose, or at least I find you lose your engineers very quickly and you lose credibility very quickly.
No, I think that's really good. I love the fact that you're talking about having that openness and, time to share with everyone, not just your direct reports, but all the engineers and all the individual contributors. And I think that's key, because you don't want to seem like you're too far away to have open, honest conversations, and you want to be there to listen to ideas. And I found that that's much easier to do in person. But like you said, today there's a lot of people that don't come into an office. What are some things that you can do virtually to help encourage that open door, communicative things without seeming kind of creepy and weird by like just pinging somebody to ask how you're doing?
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, part of it is like I would occasionally ping people randomly going, hey, how are you doing? And probably not as the opener first conversation ever, but assuming that we've spoken before.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I definitely had to learn is the moment you become CTO, you change the conversation by being in the conversation. It doesn't really matter what the conversation is. The fact you are there with your title changes the nature of that conversation. And so as much as you want to encourage openness and as much as you want to encourage transparency and sharing, be aware that you being in there means certain things will not be said. And so weirdly, as much as I like to talk and chat with people, I'm also aware that not being in the conversation is quite healthy every now and again, and just make sure that people have a forum to kind of, as peers talk rather than with the CTO. I think that's something I definitely had to learn of, like, there are places to be and conversations to be had. Virtually, you could do, open office hours where you just go, look, I'm sitting in this call. Anyone who wants to join in, I'll just be there. You could have kind of set times, or just ping people on Slack and kind of go, hey, what's going on? Give me a shout when you're up to something. What I tend to do quite a bit, particularly with the more senior engineers, is to go, hey, I'm thinking about this thing, or I'm struggling with this decision, and I could really use your input. Partially to share what's going on, because that will eventually ripple down. But also partially just because I like to hear other people's opinions on stuff. And it's not because you're the CTO that you're the ultimate, well, you're probably the ultimate decider, but you're definitely not the only. And so I think it's kind of creating that transparency of like, hey, this is a decision that's on my mind. I could really use your brain on this for a minute. And just, kind of keep that collaborative approach open to people.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that idea of just asking, going to an individual contributor and asking for their help on something and getting their opinion on things, and showing that you're listening and that you're, you can come and ask for advice. You're humble enough to do that. It's not just having, your decision be the final, and not taking input from others. So I think that's a really cool way of doing that.
Yeah, and it's an easy one to kind of jump in with people, because at the end of the day, most people like to give their opinion about something, particularly if it's in their area of knowledge. Like if I think back about the media company I was working with, where they had an expert in like video playback systems and then video streaming and all the low latency stuff that comes with that. And it's like, okay, fine. I know the basics, but I'm definitely not an expert. I was building a cost model to kind of work out how the AWS bill would scale. Like either way. So I'm going like, hey, look, I'm trying to do this. I've got some rough assumptions here, but I really love your kind of bottoms up view of making sure that my theory makes sense. And so we ended up having a lovely conversation about how you do variable bitrate streaming and how that impacts your bandwidth needs. Didn't change my cost model very much in the end, but it was good to kind of go through the motions and then hear an expertise come through.
Yeah, no, I think it is really good. Good way to do it. I have another question that's, when it comes to developing this culture and keeping things going, how do you keep people from getting burned out?
So one is the openness, like definitely, like this is on the table. I will openly share with people, struggles that I've gone through in terms of burnout, and then feeling kind of, up or not for it for certain meetings. And I tend to encourage my teams to be super open about that. There's only so much you can do by saying this. I think my mental model is always, and this is going to sound blunt, but it really works. Engineers are motivated by money and problems. And so, and I'm not talking problems in the sense that a CEO would go, "Oh, I have many problems." It's, technical challenges rather than problems, right? Things that force them to use that systems thinking, to use all the engineering brain that they typically bring along. So they might not be problems in a sort of larger business sense, but they're definitely the kind of technical, meaty challenges to go and tackle. And so my goal is to find a balance between the two. So if you're running an accounting software, you're probably going to overpay for an engineer because your technical challenges tend to be quite limited. If you're on the sharp end of AI development, you could probably get away with quite a few interesting challenges and skimp, well, not quite skimp, but at least not have to pay sort of, banking level money for these people. And so I think that to me is where can I find a healthy balance between making sure people are paid enough, but broadly that they're taken care of, right? So that they don't have to worry whether that's training needs, whether that's actual salary, whether that's just kind of, the sort of hygiene factors of having a job are taken care of. And then can I present them with interesting enough stuff to do, even if that means going, "Hey, you've got your main thing you're doing, but come and help me out on this piece of R&D here because it's going to be fun." Yeah.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I love the fact that, you have to pay people so that money's kind of off the table, where that, once you're paid a fair salary as an engineer, you're not going to leave for, a 5 or 10% bump here and there. If it's a place that you're working that's, challenging and exciting, but you will leave if you get bored. And, so I think that you hit the nail on the head when you said give people opportunities, give them challenges and things that are exciting to work on and that are unique. And, I love that.
Yeah, and I think that then goes back into the kind of, from a CEO point of view, why would I do this? It's like, well, you've got a strategy, and your strategy is not going to be keep doing the same thing we do today. You're going to look at technology typically to drive some form of innovation, and innovation doesn't happen from bug fixing your existing code. So as a CTO, that's kind of your spot to go with what I know about the dynamics in technology, what I know about our company strategy. I can carve out an interesting problem for my teams to go and tackle.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Let me ask you this then. When it comes to like doing things that are, carving out those things, do you find that just turning that over to one team to kind of work on something, or do you think hackathons are effective, or what is your kind of strategy for when you have those unique opportunities to put them out there? Just put them in the normal work queue, or put them in the backlog, or what?
So I'm a huge fan of the sort of the Friday afternoon or the 20% time at Google.
Yeah.
But the kind of concept that this isn't for the elite few handpicked by the CTO group or that special team over there. It is genuinely anyone can do this. Right? And now that leads to the question of, okay, I now have a bucket of time, if I can call it that, from everyone. How do I fill that with something useful? And so that's where I tend to go, look, we've got some big problems to tackle, whether that is a kind of a very novel thing, or whether that is sort of, hey, an extension of something we wanted to try about. Like if I think about current world status, there's a lot going on about AI, and quite a few CEOs I talk to go, what should I do with AI? And I was like, well, honestly, ask your developers. They'll find a thing to do with it. Your job is to make sure that is useful in the context of what you want to achieve. Like, it's one of those, you have a nail, and then it's like, fine, let's find a hole for it. And so if I had to do this for a CEO right now, it would genuinely be a conversation of, okay, let's write out 3-4 challenges for engineers to go and solve. And anyone can work on any of those. And once a month, we'll sit down and we'll kind of look at what's going on. And just don't try to overmanage it. This is generally my advice in these R&D style things. Like there's a point where you go beyond prototype or beyond proof of concept or beyond MVP. That's when you have to go, okay, fine, this is now a thing. Do we want to invest in this as a company? How does that look? How do we do? What's our investment process? What's our criteria? But before that, it's very much just play around, do some stuff, find some things, sign up to ChatGPT or whatever AI, or run your own local version, or burn some money on AWS credits. Pick your poison, but then just go do some stuff and try a few things. But we'll keep a short window on the feedback, so you can't go and disappear for a year and I'm going to do my AI project, right? Like I think that's the kind of balance as a CTO you need to strike around. Like, hey, I've got this undercurrent of stuff going on. I can't be blind to it, but I can't necessarily control it.
No, I think that's great. Probably about 12 years ago, I managed a team of, I was just a manager of a team of web and mobile developers. And it was right when mobile was first really, companies were first starting to build mobile apps for their products and stuff, in 2010 range. And I gave my team, I just heard about this Google, 20% time. So I gave my team, I didn't have the luxury of giving them 20%, but I said, you guys take a half day any day of the week, and, sign out of everything and just work on whatever you want that's related to our business. And, every 2 weeks, I want you to present what you've been working on, and we share it. And we had, it was I was working for an ISP at the time, and we had an online payment portal where people can, log in and pay their bills and things like that. And we didn't get a whole lot of direction from our marketing group about this. It was just, they saw this as just a utility. You log in, you pay your bill, and that was it. And one of the employees created just a very simple little one-time pop-up that pops up and says, go green, click here to go paperless. I thought, well, that's interesting. And that was his 20% time to put that in there. And we went and got approval to launch it. We launched it, went live with that little product that just popped up, go green, clicked it, and it automatically turned people to paperless. And after the first month, we realized about $80,000 of annual savings off of that from paper cost.
Wow.
Just from one little click, one little pop-up that he created. So then, a couple months later, he took the same idea and said, hey, instead of that, why don't we have something that just says boost my internet speed if they're on the lowest tier of internet service, and we can automatically add the next tier, increase their internet speed, and, start billing them. So he put that in there. And it was like $10,000 a month of increased revenue that kept popping up every month because of that one pop-up of people were just clicking it. So yeah, I'll boost my internet speed. It was like 30 days free of internet, and then after that, we would bill you the, increased rates and put you on the higher tier. And, it was extraordinarily successful for something very small that an engineer put into their 20% time, or as we call it, 10% time.
Yeah, we had a very PG-18 rated name for what was officially called Friday Afternoon Fun.
Yeah, Friday Fun Day, right?
Yeah, with the same initials, you could come up with a slightly different afternoon Friday. That is, not for this podcast. But it's the same idea. And I think, you've got great examples about things that have a dollar value and a kind of a revenue value to it, which is something that needs external push on engineers. Typically, in my experience, like most engineers don't have that natural reflex of going, oh, this could make X amount of kind of real profit. Where I find most engineers, their kind of sweet spot, their comfort zone is take a new framework, take a new technology, and see what you can do with it, see how far you can push this. Like a couple of years ago, we were looking at a new mobile app, and we're basically looking to make a decision between, do we go React Native, do we use Flutter, or do we write like proper native apps in Swift and Kotlin? And so it's like, all right, fine. The challenges are like, we know the challenge with our application has to do with low latency and startup times. So go away, build me a POC in each of these three, and we'll just compare and contrast. And people spend, a couple of weeks just tinkering around and seeing if they could optimize and slightly competing with each other in the process. And you end up with okay, fine, for our use case, that's the best option. Let's go run with it. And so you've shortcutted what would otherwise have been either a kind of a coin flip style decision by a more authoritarian CTO, or a decision that would have taken a team in a sprint probably quite a long time to kind of gear up and go through all the motions of, wow, it's a spike and I got 2 days and what can I achieve? This was a much more organic style of discovery.
Yeah, and it brings in everybody to the table, being able to make decisions and work together on it, and they learn a new skill that they can add to their LinkedIn or whatever. I think that's an awesome an awesome example.
And it's part of why I'm a huge fan of people taking sort of training courses that aren't necessarily sort of directly or obviously in line with their existing career path. I mean, again, if you're an engineer doing woodworking, it's probably stretching it a little too far. But within reason, like I fully support engineers taking accounting courses and finance classes and project management and kind of all the skills you'd expect to surround them. Not because I want them to be expert, but just to get a much more holistic view of the world.
Yeah, it also helps them with communication too, especially when you're communicating with someone in finance or accounting, to be able to understand their terms and their language and communicate back to them in that form helps build strong relationships, between the different departments.
Absolutely. And I think back to where we talked about earlier about sort of first-time CTOs or lesser experienced CTOs, I think one of the key things to learn is that you need to learn to talk to other people. And I don't mean other engineers, I mean other departments. And therefore, cross that bridge a little bit, get some basic sense of, what is important in a finance function, what's important in a marketing function, what kind of stuff drives your CMO's day-to-day operation, what kind of worries drive their day-to-day if you're a chief people officer, and kind of learn to see how those things maybe overlap with yours or maybe not, but have an appreciation that they exist. They're not just sort of, completely separated silos.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. I think having those skills to speak those different languages and understand what their needs are is extraordinarily important. And building those relationships is obviously key. So I have one more question that's kind of not related to any of this, but I found it interesting in your bio that you talked about Sundays are for football, for NFL. How'd you get into the NFL, being from the UK, and what's the experience like being over there watching the NFL?
Well, so I actually spent quite a bit of time in Boston in the sort of 2006 to 2008. So I am naturally a New England Patriots fan, which has been great, and then it was horrible for a couple of years, and this year is looking up a bit. So I'm hoping this season carries on. It's all right out here. We get most of the games on. I got the NFL pass, so we get most of the games to watch. And obviously they're coming out to play I think the Pats coming out to play in London in a couple of weeks as well. So probably get some tickets for that.
Awesome.
It's really easy to follow, remarkably easy. If you don't mind staying up late, essentially, is the only downside. Your Sunday night football is like 1 a.m. here.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, that's definitely pretty late then for there. Yeah, and we've got Monday Night Football tonight. I'm an Eagles fan, so my Eagles are playing. So hopefully they'll pull one out. We'll see.
Yeah, I'll catch that on Tuesday night for me.
Yeah, wait till the next day for that one. I understand.
Pretty much.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. I'd love to hear your insights on building culture and teams. How can people connect with you online if they have more questions or learn more about the things that you're working on?
Easiest is usually my LinkedIn. I'm fairly active there. So connect with me on LinkedIn, or otherwise a3hconsulting.com is our official website where you can also reach out to me.
Awesome. And I'll link those two both up in the show notes at geekleader.com so people can click through and find you there. Klaas, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me, man. This was great.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to, click on their links, and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. Make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.